And now, our dear friend, our dear mentor, and somebody who we admire and love a great deal, Juliana Proserpio puts the pro in Proserpio. You like the way I did that?
I did like
Thank
that,
you.
yes.
Thank you. She runs this amazing design thinking outfit in a number of countries around the world. We've lost count of how many, but it's mainly Australia and Brazil. And she's going to tell us about media products. I mean, this is something that that appeals to our hearts very much at Splice. We believe that your audience is out there and they need to be able to buy something and use something that they find useful and relevant. Juliana, all yours.
Thank you, guys. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to be with you all. Thank you all for coming as well. And thank you for the invite, Rishad, Alan, Shirley. It's been amazing working with you. So I'll just start sharing my screen. Let me know if you can see my screen now. And once I start sharing my screen, just so that you know, I won't be able to read your questions. So if you have any dying question, I think you're going to have to go unmute and ask. Is that okay?
Yeah, we'll do that toward the end. But yeah, whenever you feel like you want to solicit questions, just feel free to ask for it.
Okay, perfect. So today I'm going to talk about how to build media products that people want. They already beautifully introduced me. I am a designer. I am the founder of Echoes and Chief Design Officer. For you that doesn't know Echoes, Echoes is this independent lab driven by design. We have three main businesses: Echoes is School of Design Thinking, Echoes Innovation Projects, and Echoes Ventures. We work in these different cities, and actually now we work all around the world, as Rishad was saying. And basically, I am an outsider here. I am not from the news industry originally. I am a designer, and I work in innovation a lot. But the reason why I am here is because I have been working with news organizations and media for a while, and more specifically last year, together with Splice, we did a partnership with the Google News Initiative, and we launched the first design accelerator, and that was this acceleration program for news and media industries in Asia Pacific. That basically fostered innovation, empowered teams, and developed digital products. How this design accelerator worked, we started partnering with these partners that you can see here on the right. They were different kind of media organizations, from small startups to big organizations such as India Today or ACM. We also had medium-sized organizations, like we also had Malaysia Kini. We had someone that previously worked in Malaysia Kenya Media Group. And we worked with them, first understanding their design and innovation maturity. Then we did a design thinking training where we taught them the design thinking approach. Then we did a design sprint where we created a digital product, and we accelerated a prototype focused on a specific challenge for each partner. And then we ended with a digital product launch, where we accelerated the launch of this new audience-centric, let's say, product from each of these news organizations. But I wanted to ask you a question, because this is something that is tricky sometimes in the news and media industry. And I wanted you to answer on the chat. So do you think that you know your user as an organization or as a journalist? Do you think that you know your user or your audience? And if you know them, could you write on the chat in a sentence this definition of who your audience or who your user is? I would love to hear that, Julie, to see that in the chat. I'll stop sharing just so that I can see it here. Okay. So Corinne is saying editors and managers looking to upskill their staff. What else? It depends on which country they are from. An older mid-class millennial who is jaded with the status quo. Nice. Okay. Anything else? Do you think that, do you know your user? Sometimes we don't. That's okay as well. You can say no. A politically active young male who enjoys discussing their political lifestyle and views. Okay, interesting. So I'll start I'll resume here and I'll start sharing my screen again. Older Japanese folks with a passion for democracy and the media. We want more young guys. Busy Malaysians and Malaysians abroad, too busy to constantly read news portal. Journalists, SEOs, NGOs looking for more credible sources. Nice. Our audience is made of media professionals, students, tech, platforms, and media startups. Cool. Good. So I'm going to come back here and start sharing my screen again. I hope that you can see my screen. So how do we actually look at our users, and how do we accelerate new audience-centric products with these news organizations? So usually the way how you look, and many of the organizations look at their customers, it's through a typical customer model or more marketing model, let's say, of the users. So usually the way how we understand our users, they are based on research that is quantitative through data points, through demographic or psychographic data derived from surveys. And then you understand your users through their behavior derived from purchase or from access to your, let's say, platforms. But what we do when we're trying to understand our users from the design perspective to make better products is through some kind of research that is qualitative, through dozens of in-depth interviews and observation sessions, through rich narrative describing attitudes, goals, behaviors, preferences, images, audio, and video of the users' environments and the artifacts that they use. So this is interesting because it reveals how they make decisions, the context for their decision-making process, and unmet needs and aspiration. So usually the way how commonly any kind of organization, especially in the news and media industry, see their users is like that. So let's say if you were a company or an organization that would be looking at someone as a market research for drivers, let's say, and then you say, look, my audience is 53% of drivers age 25 and 54, stated that sometimes get distracted while they're driving and that cider bags will affect their purchase decision. This is something that is very traditional in market analysis of understanding your user. But this kind of market analysis of understanding your users is basically used to understand the purchase and also the demographics. In a design perspective, the same kind of research to understand these users would be transformed and translated into a narrative like that we call personas. So we would understand that the patterns of behaviors and needs of this kind of person and users that we're trying to use, they would be aged around 37, uses his iPod and cell phone virtually every time he drives by himself, but is concerned that this makes him a more unsafe driver, and he wishes that there was some way to meet his desire for communication and listening when he drives in a way that wouldn't decrease his ability to deal with potentially unsafe situations. So when we're trying to determine our users, and this example here has nothing to do with media and news, but it's just so that you understand the difference between understanding our users through a market perspective and the difference between understanding our users through a design perspective. In a design perspective, we are more contextual. We understand the context of our users. So we are saying that this person is using the phone virtually every time he's driving by himself, but he's also concerned and makes him more unsafe. And the needs and the wishes is that they want to have a solution that make them drive safely and continue to communicate and listen to audio in their phones. So you understand better the actual need of your users if you bring a design perspective. So that's what I want you to learn from our session here on how to build media products that people want. So we were working with these media organizations, like I was saying before, the Google News Initiative Design Accelerator, together with Splice as well. And we were teaching them how to use design thinking, how to become more innovative, how to build a product mindset. And the first thing, of course, for you to build better media products is to engage and know your user. And when we say that you need to engage or know your user, it's for you to interview and understand what are their fears, what are their desires, what are their needs, but not only interviewing them, but also observing their behaviors. If we're trying to create a new media product or a new news product, we want to understand what are these users needing or in their context where they are. So we call this kind of design research, where we kind of capture the patterns of behaviors of people that go beyond the market, let's say, research, that go beyond demographic, that we can deeply understand and empathize with our users and our audience. So first thing, when you are trying to create a product that people really want, you need to engage and know your user. Not only at the beginning when you are starting to build your product, but throughout the whole design, let's say, process and the whole evolution of your product. Even after you launch your product, you can keep learning from your users' behaviors and evolve on your product. So this is number one. The second thing that I think it's very important is that your product is not only your content. And this is something that we have been seeing a lot working with news and media organizations. So there is this dilemma, right? So are you doing what the audience wants versus are you doing what matters? But when we are building a product per se, if you think about a product not only focusing on the content per se, you would think beyond that. So your product needs to think also about being user-centric, thinking about the user interaction, the user experience, the engagement with your audience, the participation of your audience within your product, the format that you're offering, and everything else. So it's not only giving, let's say, the piece of content and news that your audience wants. Of course, that we always need to bring what is relevant, what is true, and what is happening in the world. But going beyond what is the content, that is where there is this magic, let's say, point where you can be very user-centric. And one example that we have been working together in the Google News Initiative Design Accelerator was working together with Reader, that is a new startup from Taiwan, and how they did it to become more user-centric and, let's say, audience-centric was to be building a product that was focusing on user needs, not only necessarily focusing on the content that they were building, but also on the user interaction. So I'll show you a video that kind of illustrates that. So here you can see their website, and don't worry if you don't speak Mandarin. So here on the bottom that it's showing here, it is this thing that shows you how much you have read on the article. Then there is a rating if you like the article or not. So they are constantly getting feedback from their users. Another thing that is interesting from the platform is that you can see what they are working on, what kind of, let's say, reports they are building at the moment, and how you can participate in building those reports. So there is also user participation where you can contribute to the platform, you can contribute to the articles that they are building. Also, they always show who was part of it, not only the official, let's say, journalism and the internal team, but also the externals, the civic engagement, and then everyone who was part of building, let's say, this report from Reader would be showing up there like a movie credit. So there are many of these, let's say, user-centric features embedded in their product. They help to make this product go beyond the content and make this, let's say, product more delightful, more interesting for the user. So another thing that's very important when you are building a product and you're being user-centric is that you need to brutally prioritize what you are doing. So think about it in your product and becoming user-centric. What is your product's anchor? So what really, really, really makes you solve your users or audiences problem? And when you know that, try to focus on building the best experience for your users and your audience. Focus on that and try to cut everything else. But one tip as well is that whenever you are brutally prioritizing what needs to be happening in your product to make more user-centric and more interesting for your audience, is that despite that you need to brutally prioritize what kind of features you're going to be doing, you need to think about what makes your product delightful. So balancing what is crucial and what is delightful will make your product a success. So the fourth thing that I think is interesting when you're building a product that you need to think about building a minimum delightful product, not just a viable one. So whenever you are, if you are in, let's say, in the space of startups and design and innovation, people talk about building a minimal viable product, something that it's very easy and smart to implement. But sometimes when we build only a minimum viable product, we forget what are the key moments in your product that need to feel magical for your user, like the things that I was showing before from Reader. So when you are building your product, you need to make informed decisions based on your users' needs and desires. What I was telling you before, that when you are trying to focus on your audience and doing research and understanding and bringing them and engaging them throughout the whole product development, this is true at every moment. When you are building it, when you are launching it, and after the launch, when you are evolving your product. So the best way to do that is that you need to design your product's service from start to finish. Do not only think about the click moment when they are reading it or when they are experiencing it. How do you engage them after they read it? How do you make them recommend your product? How do you make them become the best, let's say, friends of your product? And you also need to think about the maturity of the market of the product and the maturity of the users to create a memorable product. So let's say that you are building a new platform for a type of audience that are not very digitally, let's say, friendly. It means that you need to lower your features and make your product very easy to use. If they are someone who are very tech savvy, maybe you can increase your features because the market is a bit more evolved. But maybe they haven't learned how to use your specific problem. So maybe you should start small and then evolve with them and evolve the product while they are learning how to use your product. So these details are what make people fall in love with your product. So user experience and user interface. And this is what we have been doing that I shared before with Reader and all of these details of the product. One of the last tips that I wanted to give you when you are building a product that is audience-centric is that it's important for you to build a North Star and constantly evolve your product. So one of the ways of building a North Star for your product is writing sort of like a future press release about your product with your team that will help you make sure that you stay on track when you are trying to design this new product for your news organization. And also is going to help you internally tell the story, to have executive buy-in, but also to tell the story for your users so that they understand clearly what you are trying to create. And I think it's interesting, Kevin Chang from the Incredible Lab says that the relationship between storytelling and design is that you need the story for people to understand how the product relates to them. And this is really important because sometimes in the news and media industry, we think that we are the ones who need to determine how they are going to be relating with the content. But that's not going to happen. They are the ones who are the users, the audience, they are the ones who are going to be determining how they are going to be receiving it, if they want to receive it, if they want to engage with it. We just need, as whenever we are creating the product, we need to understand what are the behaviors and build a product that caters to that behavior so that we help them and we nudge them and we create these magical moments. Another partner that we have been working at the Google News Initiative with the Design Accelerator is Turkbox. And Turkbox is a very interesting platform. I also don't know if you know them. They're quite new as well. Basically, they created a new model for news organizations, like many of you are from, to have revenue. So instead of having a subscription model or having a paywall or having advertising model, they created a way that you can use their widgets, like you are seeing here on the left side, to access your article or content. So basically how it happens is that Turkbox connects with data providers, and data providers, they usually need to clean their data by specialized people, like readers from your platform, right? So they created this widget that helps, that will make your users, okay, this is where the car is, and then once you complete this task, you access the contents and the article. So you don't have to pay, or you don't have to be behind a paywall. So you don't pay a subscription and you don't have to be behind a paywall. So instead of paying as a micro payment, the user are paying through a micro task that is performing this task. And basically, the data providers pays then the media company in order for exchange of this cleaning of the data from them. So Turkbox is a very interesting new model, and the reason and the way how we worked with them is that we helped them to improve their product through the program. So they needed to be more user-centric, more publisher, let's say, centric, and they needed to evolve their product. So one of the things that we helped them develop was this dashboard for publishers to understand how well Turkbox is performing compared to subscription model or to ads model. Another thing that we work with them, it's in between the details when you are designing a new product, is that you need to be constantly improving the user experience, even after the launch. So basically, after the user performs the task using the widget, there is this small, let's say, research of what they thought about accessing this article. So you say this was a difficult experience, it was all right, and it was easy. And you can also answer why you thought this was one of those reasons. So they can learn through their product and evolve their product. And then also, there are short how-to explanations for complex tasks. So how do you perform these tasks, for example, of finding the right numbers of the dices? So these are the small things that help you to create a user-centric product, that it's not only something that is only focused on content, but also something that is focused on users, not necessarily defining what kind of piece of content that you're putting there, but on the product, on the overall. So all of these 5 tips that I brought here, they are a process that is basically design thinking. So this process that makes you become more user-centric, more empathetic, more collaborative, and more experimental is called design thinking. That is this approach that simply helps you to become more audience-centric and helps you to experiment with new formats and shapes of products so that you can deliver real value for your customer. So if you want to learn more about that, we have a design thinking toolkit that is available for everyone. And we also, I know that someone already shared, we also have the Google News Initiative Design Accelerator Playbook. So if you want to download that, this is available and for free. You can also take a picture here and you will be directed to these toolkits and playbook, and you will learn this step by step. But we gave you 5 things to help you remember what you need to do when you are trying to become user-centric. So the first thing is that you need to, of course, interview and understand your users as much as you can. The other thing is that you need to, the second thing is that you need to brutally prioritize. Then you need to build a minimum delightful product, and you need to build a North Star. So these are our tips. So I'll now go back to sharing my screen, and I'll open for some Q&A.
Well, Juliana, those case studies were awesome. So nice to see that Rita was in there as well. I think they had done some really amazing thinking around this stuff.
You should give these folks some background to why Rita was in the GNIDA thing we did with Google and Juliana.
I think so. For Rita, their background was, gosh, I'm blanking now. What did they do? So Rita is a data-focused team that sits alongside a magazine in Taiwan, and so their whole thing was always how to use technology. What?
Yeah, they are like a spin-off from Mirror Media, that is a bigger news organization, and they were a data-centric, let's say, news startup, and then we were helping them to build a better audience-centric product, and Ellen was with us, and we shot at the beginning of this project as well, and then they just launched. So now in September 9th, they just recently launched. And this is just great news that I'm sharing with you guys.
Oh, well done, Juliana. This is credit to you. I mean, it was a long process. I remember getting them to to a starting point.
Yeah, we did this program with the Google News Initiative here in Asia, and Splice and Juliana's folks at Echoes were brought on as part of this exercise to take design thinking to 7 newsrooms across Asia. And it was one of the coolest things we've done. It was a long, hard, difficult, and truly rewarding project. It was amazing, huh?
I think so. I mean, and now you see the results of that, right?
That's
so,
right.
You know, it might take a while, but
And that's how we know Juliana.
correct. Can we get to our first question by Darsh? Darsh, if you want to unmute yourself, I think you've got a really fantastic question there.
Yes, I just wanted to know how to go about thinking of design thinking when you're thinking of an email space, because you don't really have that interactive aspect and, you know, kind of immediate user feedback. So how would you go about this? Because I run an email newsletter, so.
Look, I think that you could do the same process, but you wouldn't be doing it live through your email. So you could be opening and inviting your users to answer some questions and maybe doing some one-on-one research. Because basically in design thinking, you don't want to go for quantity as in research, but you need to understand the patterns of behaviors and needs so that you would understand your, let's say, your audience better. And then maybe you could understand some new emerging needs from your users and then start to create a new product perhaps, or an extension of your product. And once you launch it, you basically would create also, you would test, of course, you would prototype, you would test, probably fail a few times, and then finally launch it. And then when you launch it, you could also, like Turkbox, I was sharing before, they always have, you always leave like a feedback, let's say, section that is embedded in your product. In email could be a button in your email. They could give you feedback about your product so that you can keep iterating and bettering, let's say, your product so that it can become more and more user-centric and learning with your users as well.
The third box was really interesting, so thanks for pointing that out.
They are amazing. They are really, they also just relaunched the dashboard and the new widgets. They are an amazing, I really do recommend that you follow Reader and Turkbox. They are really, really interesting news startups that I think everyone should follow.
Yeah, I will do that. Thank you so much.
One of our, you know, we, not to inject ourselves in here, but rather quickly, Splice began with one single newsletter. And, you know, Alan started doing this 5 years ago. And we've played around with that space, and goodness knows we've taken a lot of liberties with it. But the exciting thing is that it's very quick feedback. In fact, I would argue that an email newsletter is one of the prime ways to collect user feedback, and you see things like user intent, you know, what people are willing to put up with and what they're not willing to put up with. We had a whole bunch of things like, you know, people saying that they, you know, they display their intent about attending a conference, for example, like this. You know, you get sign-ups for things like, you know, a website that you're planning to launch or another product you're planning to launch. And people really get back to you. I would use things like first name mail merge codes, you know, and the amount, Juliana, you wrote back to me. In fact, you know, every time I use those codes.
You scare me with those emails.
What?
I get like surprised. Oh, he's saying my name. I'm gonna answer back.
I know. It's just too cute. Like people would write back and say, "Whoa, how do you put my name in there?" You know. So, and it was interesting to see how personalization worked and how people interacted with even small things like that. You could do little surveys. You know, we're doing beta online versus we're doing it and risking, you know, COVID in Chiang Mai. Which one do you want? This one or that one? And you get this little quick poll. Hey, quickly, I wanted to come to Mariam Chaudhary is our friend from The Current in Lahore. And Mariam always has a lot of cool questions. because this is about creating products in newsrooms, Juliana, Mariam, do you want to ask your memorable, unique products from newsrooms question? Go for it. I don't even know if Mariam is still up.
Hi,
Are
sorry,
you?
yes.
Yes, you are.
My
I caught
question
you
is,
unaware. Sorry.
yes, you did a little bit. What products have been designed by design thinking that you believe that are active in newsrooms that are memorable and unique? And I also have another question. I mean, I did the Google Fellowship at Columbia this past year, and we did a lot of, sprint and design thinking, and I tried to bring it back into the newsroom and stuff, but it's hard. It's hard to constantly think like that. It's also hard to get people together to do it. I mean, we're doing it for the membership model, so every Saturday has become a day where we kind of sit together, eat food, and kind of try to design things. But getting into that mode is hard. How do you manage it? How do you kind of change your mindset to think like that?
So I think that some of the unique, let's say, and memorable products, I mean, I just shared two, of course, the Reader and Checkbox have been using design thinking, but there are many others. So if you look at the Wall Street Journal, they have quite a few new products there that they have been using design thinking. If you look at the Guardian, they have been using design thinking. There is also the Globe and Mail from Canada. It's a newsroom that was absolutely redesigned based on using the design thinking approach. But to be honest, the design thinking approach doesn't really matter. What matters is that they were user-centric. And so what happened with the Globe and Mail in Canada, and the story I heard firsthand from Cynthia Young, who is now a professor at the Humboldt College in Canada as well. She was telling that what they did is that they were doing some first understanding what are the things that their users needed. So they were going up from content, what they wanted to listen and to read and listen, and also how they were using their product. So they were doing some observations and watching people in the streets, how they were using their product, the newspaper per se. So they started to understand that people were not reading the newspaper at the beginning of the day. Most of the people were reading the newspaper at the end of the day when they were going back home, when they were in the subway, or when they were in the trains, or when they were using the car. And they also started to understand the way how they were manipulating the newspaper made it hard for them. So when they redesigned, let's say, the whole Globe and Mail, and you can actually see that there is a video that really showcases the Globe and Mail redesign really well. They were putting people first, putting people at the center of their decisions, from the content to the format, to being digitally oriented, to bringing data to understand what people were reading more and engaging more. So one of the things that they even changed was that in many of their articles, they were putting bullet points, which I know that sometimes journalists hate, but it makes people go right away. So we also learned during this process and working with different media organizations and doing a lot of user research that nowadays users, they want to feel like they are discovering the content. So you need to give them, let's say, a small thing that they are engaged, and then we actually heard that verbally, like being verbally said in Singapore by a young, let's say, reader, saying that she wanted to go and discover content. So don't give me things right away. And she wanted to be recommended by peers. This was most important. It doesn't mean that let's say, the content will be written by peers, but it needs to be recommended by peers. So we need to understand these small things. So I think that these memorable and unique things, despite the ones that I just shared, I would also go for the Wall Street Journal and the Globe and Mail.
Speaking of the Wall Street Journal, if you look at our resources page on spicebeta.com/resources, there's a link there to a session that we had with Robin Kwong, who does basically, well, he runs the prototyping team at Wall Street Journal. In there, he talks about how they turned a personal finance newsletter into
a product,
course, a 5-week course or something like that. Yeah, so check that out. That's really quite useful. I want to go to Jan Ook. Jan Ook, just because you've got a question that's following up on Miriam's. Why don't you jump in, Jan Ook?
Hi, Juliana. Thanks for the session. I really like your presentation. So I have a question following up on Miriam on the time and resources it takes as well. With our team, we do a lot of, we try to do user-centered design as well. It is very time consuming, especially doing a lot of the user research. Sometimes, you have to like go to their clients' offices and kind of like sit with them and talk with them. And then we try to do design sprints and so on and so forth. And so I've heard kind of like conflicting views about the usefulness of doing just the design sprint without doing a lot of the heavy user research beforehand. Would you recommend just jumping straight into a design sprint with minimal user research, or that's not the way to go?
That is a tricky question. And I wouldn't normally, to be honest. And the reason why I'm saying that is that I've seen so many times people investing time and resources in building the wrong product. But that being said, sometimes you have a strong hypothesis. And the way for you to be user-centric without having done user research is for you to prototype very, very fast and doing a very, let's say, rough prototype, and then inviting your users to give feedback, right? So I think you can also flip a little bit in this way, but I wouldn't invest a long time in that. I would do a very rough prototype, just so that you can kill the idea fast, if that's the case. And then if you do that, you need to be very, very open to fail. Because sometimes when people do that, they want to stick with their idea and they don't care what users say. And then this is a problem because you're going to be keep pushing in something that it's not going to be working. So if you are open enough to fail, maybe you could go through this path. Usually people aren't. So maybe it's better for you to really understand your users first, understand where is the need to create something more unique. So it's kind of like an answer that it's, okay, not an answer, but that's my way to look at it.
That's great. I like the kill your product idea. It's killing it fast is great.
Kill your product. I mean, that is totally an answer, right, Jan? Because, I mean, I'm going to come to another question very soon, but I mean, ultimately, that's why you want to fail fast, because failing fast is failing cheap, right? If you don't have the resources to put yourself out there and do all this user research, you come up with an assumption, you test that assumption brutally, and then you allow your user to kill it. And it's a huge help. I mean, hey, this is how we do stuff. I mean, we make wild assumptions. We put them out there, and you guys tell us what you think. And, often it's brutal, and that's when it's useful. And it brings me to Corinne's question. Corinne, you were talking about how expensive, that divide between newsrooms. Do you want to go loud and ask your question?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Okay, so yeah, it's two questions, Juliana. Thanks so much for that. I guess it's first of all that there's a huge time expense in a design thinking approach. And I'm working with a client at the moment where we're doing a design approach, and they wanted a design approach, and even then the time is making them a bit edgy. But separate and related to that is for small regionals, locals, etc., which are the backbone really of journalism. How do we bring design thinking into these environments? So let's think about really, really time poor, stressed out people, and then also resource poor, typical newspaper in the Pacific Islands type thing. How do we bring design thinking to them?
Look, I think that's a great question, and we have been working with different sort of organizations, especially with this project. So we're not only working with the big organizations who have a lot of resources, we are also working with small organizations. And I think that the answer to that is that you probably need someone experienced to help you to be very time effective. Sometimes what makes the design process overwhelming is because you don't have enough experience to direct the project per se, to be absolutely honest, right? So sometimes, let's say that if you don't know about design and you are trying to use a design approach you're going to be at the same time learning and trying to perform and to develop a new product. And when we are learning, we are inexperienced, and at the same time we're trying to develop something, we're going to be doing both of these things poorly. So that's why also in this program, we first were learning and then we were applying into reality. Because when we're trying to do both at the same time, there is one thing that happens a lot, is that because you don't know how the process goes, you kind of put your brakes on, and then you start to bring assumptions, and then nothing goes along, or you get very insecure and you cannot move fast. So one of the things that I guess this could be maybe having some help, or the other way around, that is to be defining very project plan in sprints. And in sprints, it doesn't mean that you're going to stop a whole week and do a design sprint like it was by the book, by the Jane Knapp sprint. And especially now working remotely, this doesn't exist anymore. You can possibly do that in throughout like a couple of weeks. So we are basically running sprints now with our partners in 4 weeks. So you can only let's say, using 3 hours per week, and then another week we do 3 more hours, and then maybe 2 times a week, and then you can kind of save this time where they can still work on their day-to-day business and then focus their time on that. So
that's really helpful, because there is a design sprint section in the Accelerator guide, in the Accelerator playbook. So that's really, that's super advice. Thanks so much.
No worries.
You know, we're coming up on the last 5 minutes of the session, and I'm thinking if we don't have any more questions, I know I have a question. And Juliana, you know, we tend to ask a little question for the community. And what I want to ask is, if I were a media startup and I wanted to, you know, I was inspired by you, as we all often are, and I said that, you know, I want to launch a new media product. I'm ready for this. I'm going to do something, you know, it's going to be a newsletter, or it's going to be a podcast. I really love podcasts. I should do a podcast. I think, you know, this is good. Or I run a food magazine, and I think I should now do a podcast for that food magazine and see what happens. What's the first question I should ask myself about user testing? What are the first 3 questions I should ask myself about my audience? Or rather, ask my audience, what would you recommend in order for me to fail fast?
So you already have a prototype, is that what you're saying? You already have an idea?
All right. Exactly. I have an idea.
You have an idea. I think that, I mean, my first question would be, what is the context where your audience is at now? And the reason why I'm saying that, especially because now the context changed a lot. So the behaviors of people when they are listening, when they are reading, their time, their availability in time changed a lot because of COVID, how we are working. Mainly of us are working from home. So our routines changed completely, and our needs as well. So sometimes the needs are hidden. So because of isolation, many people said, oh, now people are isolated, so they won't connect anymore. It's the opposite. People want to connect even more because they are in isolation. So you need to kind of read through. So that's why when you are doing research, and that's the first slide that I showed, you need to do this triangulation of research, that it's not only interviewing, but also observing your users and trying to put. The second thing that I would do would be to probably create a mock-up, a very, very, let's say, rough mock-up, and send it to 10 of your users, maybe the 5 most engaged and the 5 that don't really like you. And then you heard what they have to say. Users, maybe the 5 most engaged and the 5 that don't really like you. And then you heard what they have to say.
I think that's very good advice.
So you would test it out, and you would get that feedback, and then you're saying you then iterate on that feedback.
Yes.
Nice. Yep. I mean, this is you know, media products. Everybody make something. I know a few people on this have committed. I know Corinne is one of them. These guys have committed to launching a new product. Juliana, we should have called you to that session. That was nice. There was a bunch of people. I think we had Darate, Corinne, and
Timmy.
Timmy. 3 of these people committed in public to be launching something in October, November, and December. And I forget which order that was. But no, thanks to sessions like this, I hope to see a lot more failures and a lot more successes with audiences. That was fantastic. Thank you, Juliana, as always.
Thank you, everyone. That was lovely. I hope you can
Go to Echoes, everybody.
Interesting.
Go to their website and see all the resources that they have. They have plenty of guides out there to help you think your way through this stuff. So definitely check them out. Well, we know that and of course, sign up for their newsletter as well, which is really, really quite useful. Speaking of resources, you will find a recording of this session in splicebeta.com/resources if you want to watch it again. Great tips, obviously, to hold. This will also be on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page, so check that out. And coming up in about 5 hours from now, we'll talk to the wonderful Robbie Allenpie from Puma Podcast. He's going to be talking a little bit in similar terms about how they think about launching new podcasts, how they come up with the scope around it, how do they think about the format, and how do they get it distributed. So if you are leaning toward an audio product, this is something that you want to be mindful of.
In fact, they created a new podcast under our Splice Beta Fund thing, which is all about prototyping media products.
It's called Taki or something.
Right.
Something
Similar.
Oh, by the way, they also helped us launch our Splice Pink podcast.
Right. Which is completely a prototype. We have no idea what we're doing.
That's right.
We need to test this assumption with you folks. We need to fail really quickly. Otherwise, we're going to spend a lot of time and money doing this ridiculous thing. So tell us what we're doing. One last podcast plug before I leave. I know our friend Janicia is doing a podcast. She's just launched, 3 episodes, 4 episodes?
Oh, she's panicking now.
Come on, Janicia, this is a product session. This is media products.
This is where we figure it out.
Talk to us about your podcast. Give us the 30-second elevator pitch. Come on, then.
Oh, this is really putting me on the spot. I'd have written out a bit
Yes.
and just done it in drafts or something. Listen, firstly,
Yes,
I'm planning to fail cheaply or more expensively. I don't even know. I'm just doing it right now because I really need to talk and have people listen because no one listens to me at home. Okay, putting myself on mute now. Bye.
What's it called?
It's called Thursday Bitches.
Very nice.
It's nice, non-committal
Very nice.
media watching kind of thing.
You know
It's
that
philosophical.
Shirley's already put the link in.
Oh my goodness, thank you guys. I'm going to log out now. They've just got internet issues suddenly. I don't know how.
Failing fast, Janicia Alves. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. This has been such an awesome session. Thank you, Corinne. It really has been. It has been a lovely, lovely, rich session. Thank you all for coming. We'll see
Thank
you
you,
soon.
Juliana.
Thank you, guys.